I will be refuting today Kyle Brown's speech on gambling in Major League Baseball. His claim of fact was that banning baseball players for life because of gambling has a negative effect towards Major League Baseball. His speech consisted of 3 secondary claims. The first, Pete Rose's lifetime ban gives off an offensive outlook toward the Major League Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig. His second secondary claim was that baseball players are being punished for not being the perfect human being that makes no mistakes in their lives. And the third was that the lifetime ban causes animosity towards the Hall of Fame. Moving back to the advocate's first secondary claim. Pete Rose's lifetime ban gives off an offensive outlook towards the Major League Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig. This claim was all using a hasty generalization. He used the effects of 2 people's conflicts to support the whole Major League Baseball's problem about gambling, and for me, it wasn't sufficient. The advocate discusses how Rose does not get well-deserved recognition for what he does, but in a news article from PBS.org states that despite his banishments, Rose has remained a popular hero. He received standing ovations in 1999 and 2002 when he was allowed on a baseball field during various commercial promotions, showing that even after the banishment, he is still recognized by it. The quote given from Hank Aaron states that, "I would like to see Pete in the Hall of Fame. He belongs there." Gives an example of a claim of value instead of a claim of fact. The value statement does not follow the criteria forming a claim of fact about baseball, and little to support his argument. Furthermore, the advocate did not give a sufficient cite of Hank Aaron's quote, making his argument less credible. Luckily, I did find the quote stated by Hank Aaron in an article from the USA Today. The advocate states that Rose should be punished for the time he gambled, which was while Pete Rose was a coach, not a player. But according to Paul Karen, a writer from CNN.com, wrote an article stating that Pete Rose signed an agreement with Major League Baseball banning him from the sport. He is no longer to be reinstated. In that agreement, Rose, accused of betting on MLB games while he managed the Cincinnati Reds, was declared permanently ineligible in accordance with Major League Rule 21. This shows that the Major League Baseball rules declares ineligibility to all of the baseball after failing to follow the gambling rules, which goes against what the advocate was trying to prove. His secondary claim, baseball players are being punished for not being a perfect human being that makes no mistakes in their lives. Personally, I felt that this statement was unclear and could have been reworded in a way to support his claim better. Again, we find the argument using a claim of value to support his major claim of fact. He states that the players feel that their career will be in jeopardy. He assumes the thoughts of the players and does not give a cite of evidence, therefore it can be taken into consideration of his argument. The advocate also uses his own opinion about the commissioner's ban on gambling. He states that if the commissioner can ban players for gambling, why doesn't he ban players for things like steroids? Nowhere in this argument does he support it with facts. All this is just his own opinion on the subject. Although the advocate may know a lot about baseball, it does not give the audience a credible source. His third secondary claim, the lifetime ban, causes animosity towards the Hall of Fame. The advocate's third secondary claim seemed to have correlation to the first secondary claim, from what it seemed like it was just an expansion of it. With this, he used one fact from Frank Robinson, but again did not cite where he got the quote. The advocate does discuss the Major League Baseball Rule number 21, as I discussed earlier, about baseball. Here, the advocate pretty much contradicts the statement and says that it is illegal to gamble in baseball. In conclusion, the advocate had a claim of fact down, but the claims were mainly claims of value and not facts, and did little to support his facts.
All right, the structure's fine, so I don't see any obvious problems there. The labeling as you go through each point is good. I think you've got a good challenge on the hasty generalization on the first point. and you've got some evidence that suggests that Pete Rose, for instance, is not particularly suffering outside of that context. There's a discussion about value arguments in a couple of places here, and there is obviously a need for discussion about what the criteria is, and I think what you need to do is you need to argue that the rule under which Pete Rose is banned and gambling is a problem is the criteria that we ought to be using in judging these issues, and that's the only thing that then becomes a standard, since the advocate didn't provide any other standard. And then you've got the evidence that Pete Rose himself signed the agreement that acknowledged that he gambled, that he violated the rules, that he violated the contract, and that he's agreed that to these particular conditions. I think that undermines the advocate's position a lot more if you say that's the criteria that we're going to use. The transition to the second point was pretty clear. We got a value argument again. I think the notion that players are being treated harshly for personal failings could probably be responded to by using the advocate's own example. He says, well, why don't they ban people for steroids or other kinds of drug use? Because they see those as personal faults that can be repaired and fixed, and they don't necessarily threaten the integrity of baseball nearly the same way as gambling does. And so that's why you get players like, you guys probably don't remember Darryl Strawberry or Steve Howe, a couple of baseball players who had continuous drug problems and got tossed out and readmitted and tossed out and readmitted and tossed out and readmitted and tossed out and readmitted. They each got multiple chances in that situation. Whereas, on the gambling thing, you could talk about why that criteria exists in the first place, because of the big scandal that happened back in 1919, I think it was, and all the problems that went with it. And then you've got a basic press on the third point, basically suggesting it's the first point repeated. That's okay. All right, thank you.